Cool. I'll start speaking in three, yeah, fine. We're going to today prove 3 points here. All three are likely not to go away, even if we legalize weed, meaning we're going to point out 3 problems with weed that we regret, why we regret it exists, and we are going to show you it doesn't matter what the legal matter of weed, wherever you are, they're still bad. First is why weed is physically bad. The second would be why so many people use it. And the third, if I have time, is why it's a great gateway drug. Okay. First, it's damaging to the brain, especially of young people. That's just a scientific fact. Research shows weed is damaging to the brains of people, especially under 25. It hurts your brain capacity, and it's pretty unhealthy. It's also cancerous as cigarettes because the smoke from burning weed, or the most usual way it's smoked is joints or smoking, and it's as cancerous as the cigarettes because of the smoke that comes out from burning both the weed and the paper. It can cause physical trauma, meaning you can have a really, really bad night. You can overuse it and have a real bad physical experience, which is horrible. It can bring out mental illness. Some people aren't ready or aren't ready to take weed, and it doesn't do well with them. There are people who years after taking weed, it brings out in them a side or some sort of mental trauma that just doesn't go away, and it can give them also a trauma for a long time. It's a way to pass boredom pretty easily. If you're bored and if you don't know what to do, if you're kind of sad or you don't see a point, it's an easy way to pass time. And we don't think it's a good thing because it just prevents you from doing other things that makes you happy instead of taking your mind off reality. I think it's a way of denial, and I think it makes you less of an active person and less of an active citizen. I don't think that's any good. It prevents you from studying or working or being with your family. All these things are pretty useful for a bunch of reasons of like it helps you succeed or be healthy, etc. People that have they come to have a lot of time on their hand, they just do it, and it might lead to not the greatest results. It's also an unhealthy way to deal with an emotional trauma. I might be depressed. I might be super, super sad, but it's an unhealthy way. These things or the way we deal with hardship isn't very it's you can't just take your mind off it because it's gonna meet you again in the future. Maybe when you need to help someone else, maybe when you don't have as good of a solution just taking your mind off of it. You can't always escape to denying reality or escaping from reality because it is hard. You have to deal with trauma to be emotionally healthy, and this might prevent you from doing it. It does also, yeah, it promotes laziness, etc. So I think these are all a bunch of good reasons why weed is physically bad for people, why it's bad to smoke weed. So now I'm going to tell you why it's so common, why so many people use it. First, it has great reputation. People talk about it has a great reputation. People talk about using it freely and openly, even in a cool way. Yehonathan Barak, Israeli comedian, he basically his whole shtick, his whole gig is just speaking about how he smokes weed in this cool, funny, sort of chill guy way. And it's his crowd's pretty young. They're pretty high about this, and I think they're getting influenced by him and people like him. People talk about smoking pretty freely, celebrities, etc., and it's pretty popular because of that. It's also perceived as cool and hip. People who are hippies do it. People who are like younger do it. It's very like it seems very young and very cool. Like your friends do it or celebrities that you know do it, and it's not perceived as something you do if you have PTSD, for example, or if you have some sort of a serious illness. It just perceived as a cool thing to do. So why not do it if you're easily influenceable? It's very common in social situation, meaning sharing a joint or sharing or smoking weed together is a very socially binding thing. It's a experience you have with your friends. If you're sitting by your friends and they're getting high, you feel super, super, super left out. I had it first I'm a first source to it. It's a very friendly thing. You're all in the same mind space and you're sort of out of it. You don't want to feel left out. You don't want to feel not a part of a social situation. So when your friends start smoking because maybe it's cool, maybe it seems fun to them, you'll likely want to join. You don't want to feel left out of the experience. It's very, I mean, it's addicting in the way of not hijacking the joy space in your brain, but it makes you feel great. You want to repeat the situation. It makes people feel high. It makes people just feel good and chill, makes them enjoy it. Your body starts getting used to it, so it might not have as much of an effect on you biologically, so you might need to take a bigger dose if anyone has a POI. Okay, I'm now going to get to it's a great gateway drug. We just showed it's super easy to start taking weed for most people. So why drug is a very scary term, a scary word. It's sort of a boogeyman. It's used, oh, yeah, I'll take CO.
What do you think people are going to take to feel great in the absence of weed?
I think people might get involved in sports or maybe do something that is less addicting or less looked down around as cool. Alcohol might not have the same influence per se on your brain or all the other things I just said. I'm not gonna specify, or I don't know, eat something or talk family, the hobby, I don't fucking know. I think weed, for both its reputation and effects, is especially bad. Okay, why it's a great gateway drug. Drug is a very big boogeyman word. It's used as a name for class of substances. When we talk about it, we're educated about avoiding drugs. There are campaigns in TV and by state about avoiding drugs. It's a legally different class of substance, and it's a different kind of feel that it gives you. All drugs. It's some sort of a boogeyman. It's a line to cross. And when you cross it for this first time, when you smoke weed, you make some sort of a step, and then taking the next step for, I'm not saying heroin, but perhaps taking some shrooms, it doesn't seem as severe. And it's a very good way, a very easy way to get into the drug world. You already sort of broke the law, went above the law. You already did a drug. You already went over that barrier of doing drugs. That is a very legally different thing. So I think you're much more likely to get into harsher drugs when you start doing weed, which you don't get with different sort of substances. Thank you.
Okay. I will begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. This is a very weird assumption from side opposition to believe that people that are just happened to be caught in a situation in which all of their friends are trying something new, and because of peer pressure, they might try and smoke something that is a bit different, like marijuana, would actively go and search for hard drugs under our side of the house without understanding how difficult and how different it is. In my speech, I'm going to talk about why specifically marijuana is so problematic, specifically regarding children, not children, but like, teenagers and people that are young and search for something fun and cool to do. Before that, a few rebuttals for side opposition. So side opposition are saying that all of the things that are very dangerous are addictive. They're saying that also hard drugs are very problematic and it's also alcohol. We agree, but we do believe that hard drugs and alcohol are things that it is very well known that are very, very dangerous. We know that hard drugs are extremely dangerous and very addictive. It is very well known that alcohol can put you in a very, very dangerous position, and you could be ending up in the hospital just because you mixed it with some pill. It is very well known that those things are extremely dangerous. And this is exactly where weed is so unique, because marijuana got this name of something that is very light. All the hippies use it. It is something very peaceful. It affects your mind in a good way, like opposition tried to lie to you. It is very good ways to find about yourself and about your mind, and about this is what all the hippies did, and this is what Yehonathan talks about in his stand-up shows. Right? It has some sort of a name of something that is good and is light and it's easy to take and will cause no harm. And this is the problem, because every other thing that is addictive and that is ruining your life, you know that it is ruining your life. And I will get to the impacts of this later. But also, they're giving us the point about how weed is helping with anxiety. Now, we are saying that note that this motion says this house regrets. So this is not about banning people that used weed from using it now. So it's not like we took something away from them. But what we do believe is that in a world in which you cannot drug people instead of actually fixing their problems, it is much more likely that you're going to actually take care of the core of the problem, whether it's physical or mental, right? Like so, maybe it's pills or like whatever you need in order to take care of your pain. And we think that it is much better because weed is so well known as something that is so cool and everybody wants to use it. Let's not be innocent about it, right? Even people that get weed because of mental issues or because of health issues, there are many times selling it and they're sharing it with their friends because of how easy it is to share it and because of how cool this is considered. And one side of opposition are lying to you that the comparative is that people will take hard drugs, and also CO said something about it. What do you think people will do if they want to chill? We don't think that it is likely that teenagers will actively try and search for hard drugs, and we think that weed is exactly the point in which teenagers are telling themselves, okay, well, it's not that bad. It's what everybody does. But nobody's going to tell themselves out of the blue, it's not that bad. I will try heroin, because heroin is well known as something that is actually going to cause you damage. Now, what we are saying is that our problem with weed is that it is considered a not dangerous substance, right? We are telling you that this is exactly where people can actually feel comfortable with people wants to feel cool, right? They think it has no consequences, not on your health or on your addiction. And if you're using drugs, you know it is a problem. If you're using hard drugs, it is a problem. If you're using too much alcohol, you know it is a problem. You know the danger in it. Now, what does this mean? It means that the people that are surrounding you are more likely to be worried about you. If people know that you're using hard drugs, they are going to be worried. If you drink too much alcohol when you're also using, like, taking medicine or something, or even if you drink too much alcohol, people are going to be worried about you. They're going to make sure that you are okay. Even you on your own will know that there might be a problem if you are too much addicted to it, right? But also we are telling you that many people are not going to begin with it in the first place, because starting using hard drugs and dangerous drugs and using too much alcohol is something that is very, very deterring people. And the fact that you actively need to go into the black market and be involved with drug dealers is actually very deterring people from getting into this. And more than that, we are telling you that many of the people that are using weed going to end up using hard drugs in a much easier way, because you already started using it, because you already met a few drug dealers, and some of them might actually even be your friends. And we think that because, before I move on, I'll take OO.
Yes, we think that people who sell products are happy whether or not they sell those products because people joyfully rely on them or because they become physically addicted to them.
The people that are selling products, okay, I didn't understand the POI. But what we are telling you is that we think that it is very problematic that people are getting. We think it is very problematic. People are getting so easily addicted to something that isn't considered bad. We think that that under our side of the house, if would it have been existed, we would have had more of awareness about how dangerous drugs is. There would have been a very clear line and a border between what is dangerous and what isn't. Because once people have already tried, and once people have already known like a drug dealer and tried something at some party and something that is considered cool, that is considered light, that is not considered dangerous, so we think it is much easier for you in that way to go and try things that are much more dangerous than this. This is the most important thing that we could possibly discuss, because the impact of this is huge. Almost every single high schooler has tried it because of how popular it is, because of how cool it is. There are many people that are so easily influenced, and it is very dangerous because peer pressure in those ages is very dangerous. It is very difficult to say no when it is just weed and will not cause you any damage and is not as addictive, right? And we're also thinking that the industry of people that are growing weed and are selling it to stupid children that think that it's not causing them any damages, that just wants to feel cool, and later on they're ending up getting in trouble with some drug dealers that are taking advantage of them. This is very, very important, because we think that the impact of peer pressure in these ages is huge, and that is why it is the most important. It is more important than a few people that can have alternatives about medicine for their pain or for their mental illness. The most important thing is preventing people from getting into hard drugs. For all these reasons, please us. medicine for their pain or for their mental illness. The most important thing is preventing people from getting into hard drugs. For all these reasons, please us.
I thank the Deputy Prime Minister for a wonderful speech, and to continue this debate, I'm about to call upon the Deputy Leader of the Opposition. Hear, hear.
Okay. I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Two main points. First of all, the large population who must have weed. Second of all, is the missing burden of why people will go to other drugs, and specifically what will be the comparative in a world without weed. But first of all, rebuttal. Government tells us that people that is very addictive, weed is very addictive, yes, and people will not be able, after one use with their friends, they will not be able to get away from this. We think that not. Weed is not a very much addictive drug. After a couple of months without it, you kind of lose all of the implication, unlike other hard drugs, unlike opioids, unlike alcohol, it will come in my argument later. But we also think it's only educational in the impact of weed is actually spread in the country. A lot of people know about it, so they can choose whether to do it or not. And when they choose to retreat for it, because it not have such an hard symptoms of addiction like other drugs, it's much better that they will have weed. Even if, by the way, we also think that even if they use it one time for friends, a lot of the population will actually do it, will benefit from it because they understand that now they have a way to relax. Okay, I'll get it in now in my argument. So the right population who need to have weed. So who are the people? Who are the except for the people who really need it for the medical needs? I think that a lot of people in the whole society for all over the world that have troubles facing a lot of obstacles in their life. And most of time it's come from kind of a fear to do it, a fear to do it, a fear that once you will do the stuff you need to do, it will kind of overcome because you can kind of get like in a mental loop, right? Like I want to study for a test, but I'm fearing the test will be too difficult, so I don't study, and I'm continuous, and the fear builds on and on and on, and then I found the test or something, so the fear build. Also like public speaking, also like worrying about, stuff that happens on the world. Yes, stuff is happening on a global scale. Like as the junior use stuff, political stuff. I want to do something against them, but I feel they're overwhelming me. There's too much to overcome. But if I could somehow relax easily and easily, I could overcome these obstacles and kind of just do it, right? So when I say just do it, but just do it is not very easy. First of all, need to face this is the first mental obstacles, and we think that they can fix it like with psychiatrists or stuff like this because a bunch of reasons. First of all, statistics, psychiatrists are very, very expensive. There are also like a kind of gap in your mind of going to a psychiatrist, to go into them, like treating your problem. It's very, very, it's much harder. And again, people with a heart disease actually can discover it from the weed as we explained to you. But most of the people will not go to them, will not actually treat the problem, will let the problem build on and on and on and all use other very, very bad drugs. But I think that in our world, they will use weed, yes, and they will use weed, which helps them kind of relax. And because it's not very much addictive, maybe they use it some time in life and later in life, maybe not. We don't think it's so much, and we don't think they also show us why it's so much healthy and not healthy, especially with, sugar and stuff that people take in the comparative also, which is also unhealthy. Um, and we think that for that reason, we will help so many people overcome the obstacle and so many people to have like a better life. So it is an impact on this debate. But we also, okay, so now to the second argument. Why will people in the comparative world without weed will go to hardcore the drugs and stuff? So we think because of what I show you, of people having a need to relax, having a need, even if not for a very hard obstacle or something, even just after having a very, very hard life or something, they would want a way to relax. Not just talking with their friends, because it's not give like the highest impact in your mind, like really changing your brain. We think a lot of people, again, there are people who don't need it who will also not take weed. But there are people who actually need, like the hard heat on the brain that just makes them relax. And they think in a world without weed, to face this need, will maybe sell alcohol in a lot of alcohol, which is very bad for liver, it's very bad healthy, much more, and it's also much more addictive than weed. But we think the more likely comparative is like opioids, some opioids or heroin and stuff. Opioids like it's starting like a kind of a med that help you forget about pain and stuff. But we think people in the world without weed will use this medication a lot. The people will start selling it on the street. Well, like what happened in the US, the United States, but to much larger extent because you have a larger number of people who in our world consume weed, but in this world want the outdoor gas, want the fun, want the kind of relaxing heat to their brain, and who also develop a large market of those opioids who sell it a lot, who will make another people or need it because they will sell it to them in every corner. So we think they might, if the people still need, if the heart of the problem still exists, people will not go for like therapy or talk with as a friend and family because it's not giving them what they need. It's not giving them their heart relax, and instead will go to like opioids and stuff, which is much harder for them because it's much more addictive, much more destructive, and so on. We also, okay, I will take POI second house.
Yes, we get no explanation why when I'm stoned and want chocolate, I'll suddenly start doing homework and be productive.
Okay, thank you. So what I'm saying is not like in the same minute you get stoned, but after you get stoned, you become relaxed, right? You become relaxed about all the big obstacles that you keep getting so much in your mind. And then after you finish with after it's by the way, even if when you have the drug, so you kind of relax, so you can go to your problems with an open mind, with a clear mind, and we think there are a lot of changes that you will do in them. But even after the drugs fade off, you kind of already relax. You remember the relaxation feeling of the big problem, and you think you will be able to do it much well. Okay, to conclude, what we show you that first of all, there's a lot of people in the countries that in the world that really need weed, that actually very much help them. And in the comparative, where there is no weed, they'll go to some really dangerous stuff, or like opioid or alcohol, a lot of highly addictive stuff, which makes them much more dangerous and harm than weed. We also think what is saying about the negative health of weed. We think that a lot of people, because it's like drugs that got normalized in the society, people know about this implication, and we want this debate because we show you the major populations that will benefit from it, why in the comparative world is so destructive and wrong, and for all of these reasons, oh.
I will explain how in a world where weed doesn't exist, crime rate will be much lower, which means that people would live much more peacefully and have a better life. Firstly, let's start with rebuttals to 0. They said that people need for medical need also against one. We agree, it does help. And this thing is addicting and doesn't make you want to overcome it and actually grow up. It's known that people who do a lot of weed say it felt like their life has just been stopping for like half a year during the months they were doing weed. Also, they said it again, weed helps people. Again, some people also need LSD to help them. Also, some people do cocaine, it makes them feel great. Only because it gives short-term help doesn't stop the fact that it has long-term, unchangeable harms on your body, including harms to your brain. Also, the last thing, almost say that all drugs are bad for you. We completely agree. By the way, the heroin problem in the US started from the legalization of weed in those times and the extension use of it. Let's firstly explain how easy it is to get weed compared to other drugs. Firstly, it's extremely cheap. Weed is the cheapest drug by far. Secondly, it's just not seen as a major harm, so it's much less taboo on this. Thirdly, it's so easy to buy it from every single person for every single town, and also you can buy it in a stable system to buy and sell. For example, in those kind of apps. Also, major law enforcement doesn't do shit when they find you smoking. They just don't care unless some strict countries. Also, a ton of it is coming from medical, which makes it much more hard to track with and much easier to get. A ton of it has been distributed much more. Last thing, friends will literally offer you, and it's seen as an activity use and something that is no harm. So now that we know how common it is, let's talk about how will a world would look like without it. So we think that the most important thing is that everybody forget about is crime. and how much it will prevent crime. Firstly, because currently major of police forces are into tracking and stopping big weed manufacturers and sellers. It means so many things. It means that there are a ton of officers who need to track people that trade weeds. We need to have a ton of technology getting into the funds of these kind of people. We need to have a ton of funds to have all these people, to have all these kids, to go and make all this arrest. When we have a world without weed, we literally wipe this all out. We don't have this problem. We're getting one drugs out of the street. We literally managed to, like this, get out of the drug, which is insane. Which means that these officers can be used to actually fight crime. Crime families, for example, that sell and buy guns and kill other people, which is what's more important than people who smoke weed. Also, all this money can be used for much better things for the police and also for the public, which means we have one less enemy to fight off. Yeah, for example, in Mexico, this can help the country a ton without having to the need to fight these drugs manufacturers all the time. We will explain later on how it affects also other drugs. Yeah. Okay. Crime families and cartels make billions a year from trading weed. They use this money for firstly money laundering because they need to get their money, which means they're doing a lot of other crimes in the US and those kind of stuff, and making a lot of bribes to officers so they won't see what they are doing. Also, they buy weapons, they buy guns, they kill other people to fight over territories, means there are much more harms. Also, they get this money for influence on politics, for influence on people, for influence on mayors, which means again a lot of money is getting into dirty hands, being used not for the citizens, not for us as citizens, but for those crime families who also make a ton of money for it. Also, as we said, I'll take a rewind. Yeah.
Why are
Wait.
these problems not solved when you legalize weed?
Again, so firstly, we are talking about the world where it's right now, which is in most of the world, weed is not legalized. And secondly, even when we do legalize weed, we still have the problem of the gateway drugs and the things that people use with it. And also, when you legalize weed, you want it under certain conditions. Even in the lands where weed is legal, it's not legal to just make a ton of weed, whatever you want and however you want. Also, there, yeah. Okay. As said a bit in OJ, the weed is a gateway drug. What they didn't explain that it's so much more than that. It's so much more. It's about how much harder it is to make the jump to harder drugs from alcohol by having weed in the middle. Let's talk about the next big things to do after alcohol. There is LSD. LSD is the most normal thing to do after this. People wouldn't just want to make the jump to LSD. LSD is very extreme. It's seen as harming. It's seen as terrible. It's seen as something that can make you long causes consequences. Also, by the way, weed can do the same thing, but it's not talked about enough. Also, people, as I said, people view weed as an easy drug. People who don't want to do drugs will do it as weed as lightweight for them. But they wouldn't jump the next level to LSD or cocaine. It's about the difference. They won't go so far. It's much easier for people to do another drug, to drink another alcohol when they do it momentarily, not when they have to make this big of a jump. Who are the people who would still do all these extreme drugs? Let's talk about it. The people who are more crazy people. Those in prison, those are very bored. Those are suicidal. They want to kill themselves because they have nothing else to lose. They don't care about it. They can do those jumps. Let's talk about who do those stuff currently. People again who go to parties, people want to be cool, people to be nice, to have families, to have friends, to be including in something, want to try something closer, a bit closer to the edge, but not want to do those big jumpers. As we said, yeah, about crimes, it means that people will do also much less other drugs like cocaine, for example, or heroin, which are much worse and still wouldn't help if we legalize weed, as they just said. Yeah, it means that we can have much less police having to be involved in all these crimes of other drugs, which means we can have much more police on the force helping against, for example, as we said, weapons. We can have much more money to free up and to give it, for example, to the educational system. We can help much more people, and we have much less problem of drugs in our country, which is really terrible, which harms people, wastes the life, doesn't let them any chance of a better life for themselves, and as we said, ruins the street for other people, for example, that have to be when those drug junkies are being violent and those kind of stuff. Yeah, so what we show that in our world there is less drug use, and my partner will also show how weed doesn't help shit, and we explain all those impacts. Also, I want to talk about last thing. why the with good effect is not actually that good for us. We said about the relaxed part about it. It makes you physically addicted to this feeling. Just like, by the way, you are addicted to the cocaine feelings. It's something psychologically in your brain. It makes you want to do more than this. It's not neurological. It's like coffee. It makes you want to do more of this because it makes you feel good. It doesn't give you any ambitions for your life. It doesn't make you feel to do want to do something else. It's an easy solution that doesn't require anything from you. It makes you lazy. It makes you work less hard, and it doesn't makes you a man that can overcome those difficult situations. Please, and because of all of this, let's have a world without weed. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you to everyone who got me here. And I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. We're going to explain to you why reality sucks now, and it sucked even fucking worse before that, and especially in the 6 decades that have passed since the trend of weed has started. OO talks to you about the pain of the body and how they're helping to deal with it, how they're dealing with medical issues, etc. We are going to deliver a case about the pain of the soul, and the pain of the soul through the decades that have been, and how many people we'd helped saved over those decades, and thus we'd have a much bigger impact than our first part. Okay, notice that weed has helped people to escape reality. Why would they want to be disillusioned with reality? Yes. When did the weed thing even start? Notice that reality sucks currently, but what I'm going to say is going to apply also for the time of the 60s, so listen carefully. A, people are feeling currently a lot of existential dread. It's very hard to deal with the feeling like the world goes to whatever, whenever, and you can't predict the future. It's very hard to deal with that kind of change. It's very hard to feel like you're not in control anymore of the world, and that kind of feeling puts people off. No. Also, billions of people have been stressed through the decades trying to survive their day-to-day life, dealing with the world changing so rapidly and whiplashing them every time again. Notice that humans 200 years ago dealt with technological changes like we're dealing today in 5 years over 100 years, but they had to deal in the past 60 years with those kinds of changes every fucking 5 years to 10 years. That kind of stuff puts you out. Now, that kind of whiplash effect is deeply troubling and destabilizing to the general. But this is where weed comes in. We're going to explain that way it's the best trade-off, and secondly, that especially in the past where people were less informed, where mental health was a lot more stigmatized, and where people didn't get the help they need, this was the best alternative, and this was how a lot of them were saved. Notice that we're talking about when weed started. It started in the 60s when there were hippies, there was the Cold War, and especially the threat of the nuclear missiles with Cuba. It's very hard to function in a world where you're constantly worrying about being nuked. And I'd have to tell you about that. I was worried about that for the past 2 weeks. Now, the end of the world feeling, the feeling that everything is going to end, the feeling that an apocalyptic world is on the verge of your doorstep in one little miscalculation is deeply troubling, and it does not allow your mind to relax, it does not allow you to sleep, it does not allow you to live your life normally, it does not allow you to function as a normal human anymore, because that kind of anxiety has a chemical effect on your brain, on your body. It shortens your lifespan and puts your high blood pressure and your heartbeat and every kind of other health effect you have and worsens it. Now, notice the alternatives they had in the 60s, because this is the time where weed actually made the biggest impact. They had drinks, they had cigarettes, they had cults, because that's what they went for, the hippies. That's what they could. And there were a lot less safe alternatives that posed a lot greater risk than weed. We're talking about the time of sex and rock and roll and shit and drugs. And the strong drugs, not the kind that are actually manufactured well. Now, notice that those were a lot less safe and posed a greater risk than weed. They had a long-term effect that are irreversible on their health and detrimental and a lot more severe than just not really remembering where you put your teeth. Now, if you think peer pressure is bad right now, noted that it was a lot worse in the 60s and in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. You think that the peer pressure of nowadays is bad, but before you had cell phones, when it was just your friends who were around you and just those people actually affecting your actions, this is where you actually had to feel and deal with that kind of peer pressure, and without the empowerment of, oh, you can resist, oh, you can do something else. No, peer pressure was a strong thing. Always talking about the people being informed and not succumbing to peer pressure now, and when it's popular, and when you can have that access to information everywhere. However, we think that millions of lives were saved due to the defaulting to weed instead of the less safe alternatives that I've already told you about, when they didn't know even the damage that those less safe alternatives caused, and when they weren't aware of those damages. Why? Let's talk why? Because there wasn't a lot of information on mental health, on how to deal with that. It was stigmatized. There weren't therapists, and there wasn't even talk about it. It was bad for men to cry, for God's sake, which is something that is unthinkable for us today. Now, we know that about the damages of the alternatives, but weed was a very much safer comparative, and it also took people from using the worst alternatives, because once you use weed, you're already in a chill state, you're already in a zen. You don't feel like you need to have another drink or you have to do heroin. You're good, you're fine. And that's kind of the kind of feeling that stopped people from going and making their situation worse just because they're chasing some relief, just because they want to put their minds off the suffering that they're currently going through. Now, before I continue, let's take CG.
Yeah, weed doesn't help you lead your life in the future. Therapy does. Sport does. Weed is a short-term solution that makes the problem worse.
Thank you, Natan. I've already got a point made for you for that. Now, why we don't really believe in the alternatives like sex and sport, etc. We think that those kinds of alternatives require a very strong ability to action from an internal perspective. When your brain is exhausted, when your brain is anxious, when your brain is unable to deal with what's reality delivering, the kind of feeling of internal action is impossible, because it's very hard to change your current state without an internal change, but it's impossible because the brain itself cannot change and alter its state because it's already depressed. It already doesn't have the resources. It's very hard to take any kind of active action like do sports or go out and have sex, which most people don't even have partners for, so that's not a good alternative. But sports or food or etc., when you don't have even the ability to summon yourself to go and get some food or to go and get that kind of alternative relief, you're just too tired, you're too exhausted, you don't have the ability, everything feels so doomed. Now, why did weed help so much? The same people of the sex, hard drugs, and rock and roll, they found the solace in weed, and that's awesome. They managed to find relief, which is great in the times that they were dealing with. And it's probable to believe that with the amount of panic they had, and the spike of suicide they had, this is where we got them safest. This is where we prevented people from suiciding. This is where we prevent them from abusing other substances. And this is where we got the most people saved, millions of them. For all those reasons, please oppose.
My speech in 3, 2, 1. I'm gonna go by teams. First of all, two things. Number one, what are our biggest impacts? I think that first of all, killings in gangs, or I don't know, in war against drugs. We think that alongside our other impacts, that's the biggest. And more importantly, why the likely comparative is alcohol. So we think that people are scared of heavy drugs. We think it's easy to steal a shop or a gas station, but it's hard to rob a bank. If you're broke, you won't rob a bank. If you have anxiety, you won't go into hard drugs because they're scary and whatever. Second of all, we think alcohol does change your consciousness. So we think that it's also popular and whatever. We think all of the good impacts from weed are also from alcohol, and we think that that's probably the safest and the likely the likely thing to happen in the comparative. So, and in medical fields, we think that we have other painkillers. Sure, they are less effective, but we think that that's better than addiction, better than people getting addicted to it. And so what does it actually do in this debate? We think that against opening opposition, then they maybe win on rare medical conditions, but we show you that if the comparative is alcohol, you know what? Never mind. Against opening government, it just shows that their analysis isn't comparative because they show you all the bad things in weed, but they don't explain anything about alcohol and where those people will go. We think those people will go to alcohol and not hard drugs. And in our case, it tells you that no crime organization can promote heroin or can promote alcohol, and so there will actually be less crime. Let's get to opening opposition. So what are their cases? Number one, they're telling us that weed is healthy, more healthy than alcohol and other drugs. We think that alcohol is better than weed. Maybe it's less healthy, but we think that you won't fall into other drugs. You won't do harsher drugs, and you are less likely to get addicted. And their bigger case is anxiety. Life is overwhelming, hard to do things. So first of all, like I said in the POI, there is absolutely no explanation why suddenly I will be productive. I will actually do things. I will solve my problems instead of sinking into this pit hole of drugs and weed and whatever. Second of all, we think that when the drug fade away, I feel like shit and I'm the least productive I can ever be after the drug fading away. So they get no impact there. Thirdly, we think that they don't really explain why do I feel so bad without weed. They tell us that life is overwhelming and it's tough, but sure, life is tough. That does not mean that weed is the answer. And fourthly, we think that alcohol is can solve these problems. We get no explanation why it's so bad. Sure, it's a bit less healthy, but we don't get any explanation why it's so bad, and so we think that alcohol can solve these problems, and we think that their only case that stands are medical conditions or rare medical conditions, but we show you that people there get addicted. We don't want that, and so I don't know what they're left with. Then closing opposition tells us that reality sucks. There are existential threats, missiles, whatever. So three answers to why weed is not the solution, whatever. Number one, we think that the threat will go away. The existential threat does not exist all the time. We think that it will go away at some point, and the addiction will not go away. And then when sure, maybe I started when there are atomic missiles, but then I will continue and do weed when it's a bit hard at work or a bit hard with my family. And then people will actually do weed at any tough situation. Second of all, like I said, alcohol, we don't understand a good solution for these people, for these anxious people that feel like the world is collapsing. Third of all, we think that it actually does more harm than good. So maybe they're solving the case for these anxious people, but we think that yes, weed does more harm than good. And here comes in our analysis on crime, why crime is so bad and why we solve a lot of crime, we get a lot less crime, and we think that it's less killings and so on are much more important than people feeling better. And we think that even for hippies, it did more harm than good because suddenly the police fight them on drugs, and here they have another existential threat. Whatever. Let's take a POI from opening.
Yes, in a world without weed, you will have drug wars against opioids like what happened in China.
Okay, we don't think that's likely because we showed you why there will be no customers for this. We show you why there will be less customers for this. So maybe the war will be easier. I don't know, less cartels, whatever. So blah blah blah. How are we looking against opening government? They have basically two cases. Number one, they explain why weed is bad, why all of the bad impacts, but because because the comparative is alcohol or even worse things, we don't think that in the comparative, we agree with oppositions that in the comparative, people won't just do sports or sex. They will go to some drug and they will go maybe to alcohol because it's, I don't know, popular, easy, whatever. And we think that and their analysis there is just not comparative, and we show you why crime is inherently worse than people that will use weed, alcohol on both sides. Second of all, they tell you that weed is a getaway to other drugs. By weed, you will get to other drugs. Sure, Natan has analysis on that, but I will go against him and say that people that aren't afraid of hard drugs will get there anyway. Maybe it won't be by the weed, but they will get them there anyway. So we think that their analysis is simply not comparative, unlike ours.
Wasn't looking. I'm audible. Great. Okay. Right. Aim. Okay. Sure. Let's start in 3, 2, 1. Also whipping my teams because the cases that we're getting from opening government and closing government are very similar. What are what are governments telling to us? They're telling us basically weed seems really seems fine, but it's actually really, really bad, guys. And I'm going to start with OG here, but a lot of this also applies to CG because a lot of their analysis is really derivative. OG is telling us, oh, okay, so, some direct rebuttals, some weighings and mitigations. They're telling us, oh, it's as cancerous as cigarettes because of the smoke. That's not what makes cigarettes cancerous. It's the nicotine, which weed doesn't have. They're saying, oh, this thing is damaging to your brain. Okay, but how damaging? What do we know? Do we you don't give us examples of, oh, people develop early onset dementia. People develop more people lose their gray matter. We see news of it on the news. Why? Because that doesn't happen. Because we don't see what do we see on the news? We see people dying due to drunk driving. We see people dying due to cancer from cigarettes. We see people dying due to all sorts of liver diseases that they get due to consuming too much alcohol. What don't we see? People dying early from diseases due to weed. Why? Because it's not as dangerous. Because notice when governments are telling you, oh, weed seems fine. The people that are doing it seem chill, but it's actually not. Why not? If it was really that bad, you would be hearing a lot more people saying that, hey, this thing is dangerous, this thing is bad for you, and you wouldn't be hearing this many people telling you, oh, it's chill, it's fine, actually, because the people that live through drug problems don't want other people falling into the same pit hole as them. That's why we have active people campaigning to make people more aware of the problems of heroin and cocaine. Why don't we see the same thing happening with weed? Because it's not nearly as dangerous. That's to answer the medical harm that OG is bringing. What is OG left with? Therefore, OG is left with, people are not going to take care of their problems, and also this is a gateway to hard drugs. I want to answer the gateway to hard drugs first. But I want you to remember that people manage to drink alcohol, which I've already told you has a lot more known dangers than weed, not just the medical health dangers, but also just the danger of a person who is drunk around you is known to be more violent, is known to be irrational and to burst out and stuff, as opposed to a person who smoke weed, who is just chill and maybe kind of floating. Why do people still manage to drink alcohol and not turn to hard drugs? Because the line is clear. Because of all of the analysis that OG gives us, that weed specifically is being categorized to you as something that is not as bad, similar to alcohol. It is something that you do with your friends. It is something that you do in a calm environment. It is not something that you do and are then offered immediately afterwards LSD, because after you've done weed, vast majority of people don't need to go and then do and then do LSD. They're chill. They're fine. They don't. The perception of other drugs as hard drugs stays even when we acknowledge that some drugs are light. We've already managed to do it with alcohol. We've very largely managed to do it with weed, etc. Therefore, we are left only with people are not going to take care of their problems. Now, The answer that we get from OO is, some people, sometimes people can't deal with reality, and people want to feel and relieving pain and such. Now, the amount of people that are suffering from chronic pain that is bad enough to need weed and is untreatable is relatively is small relative to the group of people that we are talking to you about. We're talking to you about a lot of people who for the first time in the last century. Here I'm doing weighing and emphasizing our case a little bit. We're giving you people who, for the first time, have had to face with the existential dread that their life could be over in the blink of an eye, and there is absolutely nothing that they could do about it. And this was not a small amount of people. This was people around the world who were having to wake up to the reality of a world post-nuclear weapon after Hiroshima and Nagasaki, knowing that that if the war has escalated far enough, this could be them, and there's nothing that they could do to stop it. And this is a state of mind that is incredibly difficult to function and be productive under. And here we're answering the points from both OG and CG that are saying, but weed doesn't make you productive. Okay, but the people who can be productive choose to be productive and do so. And lucky bastards, I wasn't able to study very much when the missile crisis was happening. Now, the alternative that weed was offering these people who couldn't be productive is much better than what they would have had to deal with. They would have had to deal with a situation where they have to keep going to work, where they have to keep investing money into buying a house that could be demolished in the morning. This was something that is unprecedented. It's not. This was a very different world than the world that we live in now, when we're used to it and we know that the mutual assured destruction is going to prevent people from using this thing. They have just seen those bombs land on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and they're seeing the Cold War unfold between Russia and America, and they have no idea when the thing is going to erupt. Trying to be productive and do something for your future is very difficult when you don't believe that it is something that is going to last. Okay, OG.
If we didn't exist, you could have just used an alternative treatment that you can't also smoke with your friends at 16, like a drug or a pill or whatever, like medicine.
Okay, medicines are not effective enough. Medicines that aren't also considered to be drugs aren't effective enough. And notice with you that we're talking to you about the 60s, when lobotomy was still something that was being practiced. The field of psychiatry was absolutely, if psychiatry is bad now, back then it was absolutely dog shit. Okay, meds were just starting to be developed. A lot of them were not safe yet. You were seen as a lunatic when you were trying to go to a psychiatrist or be admitted to a mental health hospital. Fuck, being gay was considered a disorder back then. We don't. The alternative of psychiatry was not a very good one to these people. Why is this important? Because this was a turning point in humanity's history, when we had to become adapted to the fact that we are living where that nuclear weapons is something that exists, and it is something that we have to continue to be able to operate under. We think that these people were the existence of weed offered these people a much better alternative than fucking alcohol and cigarettes. CG, those things are so much more harmful to your health. What are you talking about? And for those reasons, oppose whatever.